千里之行，始于足下。A journey of 1,000 miles begins beneath the feet. We now gather in the Tao to travel the journey together. Welcome to Tao Talks with Derek Lin, where we take a deep dive into the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu. I would like to extend a warm welcome to you. Thank you for joining us. I would like to invite you to center your thoughts and direct your attention to this moment in time, to the here and now, to be fully present and mindfully aware as we all ready ourselves for this sacred process in the Tao with one another. So this slide is called the Non-Deified Tao. I want to specifically bring attention to an important point underlying all of our discussions. And what I'm trying to say is that there is no conflict between the concept of Tao, which is the column to the left in this slide, and the concept of the Tao, which is the column to the right. You and I are truly fortunate to live in modern times in a world with a rich tapestry of different perspectives. I know, as I said, many people in society at large have not heard of the Tao. Some may know it's a different way to look at the world, but they're not sure about the details. So let me highlight some of these differences. In the traditional concept of deity, we have the supreme being as the creator. In the non-deified Tao, it is talking about the formless essence as the source. I'm bringing these side by side to point out that there doesn't need to be a conflict because the formless essence can be referring to the same thing. It is not denying anything to the left-hand side. So traditionally, we think of the supreme being or the creator as responsible for the creation of heaven and earth. From the perspective of the non-deified Tao, this formless essence as the source existed before heaven and earth. So, in the same way, heaven and earth arose out of that essence. In the traditional concept, we have this phrase, "Let there be light," the first phrase ever uttered in creation. This is in the beginning of Genesis. The non-deified Tao, this is not a deity, not God at all. In contrast, it is silent. It has no need to speak. It is much more like a tool that you and I might use to accomplish a specific purpose. You and I may speak, talk about it, but the tool itself is silent. The tool has no need to speak. We may utilize a natural law in our calculations to get a specific result. There again, the equations that we're using, the principles they embody, they do not speak. They are silent. So in the traditional concept of a deity, there is a wish to seek fellowship with mankind. On the Tao side, we talked about self-sufficiency, needs nothing and no one. So right now, we have built up this picture, this idea of the Tao. It doesn't say anything. It is not something that gives orders or issues commands. And here, to be self-sufficient, well, the Tao is what we call the totality of existence. If it is everything, the Tao already includes all. When we say all, that's everything and everyone. So it makes sense to say that it doesn't need anything if it is already everything. Next, we have seen the traditional concept of deity go through changes throughout history. Not a big surprise, because humanity itself, in that respect, have also changed. Whereas we talked about the Tao being constant and changeless. And we also speak of a deity as moving in mysterious ways. That is just a way to talk about how we can't always comprehend this supreme being whose understanding may far surpass that of humanity. So we don't really get the mystery. We don't really understand everything that the deity may do. Whereas we have just seen how the Tao can be seen as moving in circular ways. And this is manifested everywhere. We see this all the time. And we talked about mother just a moment ago. That's another difference. Traditional concept of deity usually, not always, but usually depicted as male. The Tao always described as female in essence. So that's another clue to us that the traditional concept of deity and the Tao are completely different. And when it comes to the approach to creation, the traditional concept is the deity being more like the architect who has a plan for creation, who created, like the architect building a construction. The creator created everything more like a master craftsman or master carpenter. The non-deified Tao, it is not a construction. It is not craftsmanship at all. It's the mother who gives birth. And lastly, in the traditional concept of a deity, the deity is praised as great in prayers and songs. We have just seen Lao Tzu describe the Tao as great. There, the difference is that greatness of the Tao is based on the observations of the sages. And as I talked about in the previous slide, Lao Tzu notes the Tao is infinite in capacity and inexhaustible in functionality. So looking at the columns, I think it is safe for us to conclude that Tao cultivation can coexist harmoniously with one's personal religious practice. And I would say this covers any religion or the lack of a religious practice. When I think about this, in some ways, I see it as being like the dynamics of science and religion. I want to point out that the two can be reconciled and the two can be together in a synergistic fusion. The reason why I say that is because there are certainly scientists who are religious. They exist. There's quite a few of them. There are also religious people who have made important contributions to science. So the two are not mutually exclusive. I would even cite Isaac Newton as someone who embodied both. Newton was, without exaggeration, the greatest scientific genius in history, but he was also a devout Protestant who spent more time studying the Bible than physics. So, out of all that, we can see the definite possibility for science and religion to coexist. The same can be said for traditional concept of deity and the non-deified Tao. As I learned the Tao from decades ago, I learned from real-life sages and knowledgeable cultivators. They all said the same thing. They said the Tao is not a religion. In the West, when I talk about people about the Tao, some provide the opinion to me that the Tao is sort of like science because the Tao begins with observations of nature, and that is the scientific method. Of course, I would then point out that the focus of the Tao is on the spiritual dimensions of life. So, in that respect, it is quite different from science. Science has no comment on the spiritual dimensions of life or metaphysics. Conclusion. All we can really say is how Lao Tzu describes it. We also don't know that much about the deeper nature of reality. So, like Lao Tzu, he says, forced to describe it, I call it great. So I think great is a pretty good adjective for us to stick with, at least for now. Our meeting has come to an end, but the journey continues on. Until next time, may the Tao fill you with peace and happiness.